Monster Hunter World and Dauntless. Two very similar yet very different games that both occupy a very small genre. But what game is the right game for you? Well, today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to hopefully help answer that question for you. Now, this video is purely going to be comparing and contrasting the games from one another, their combat, world, performance, gameplay systems, and things like that. I'm not trying to prove that one game is better or worse than the other. I might throw my personal opinion in here and there on what systems I enjoy or dislike, but the objective of this video is to help you decide which game better suits you. A large reason for me making this video is the game's difference in accessibility. Dauntless is free to play on the Epic Store, and Monster Hunter World is still $60 on Steam? Holy shit. It's a year old! Of course, if you play on console, you can pick it up for much cheaper used. That's one thing I really miss about consoles. Anyway, getting started, the first thing we're going to talk about is the game's worlds. Both games have high fantasy themes, Monster Hunter's world being a little bit more grounded. Well, as grounded as you can be in a game about humans with crazy weapons killing dinosaurs. Monster Hunter's exact style is difficult to pin down. While a bit of the construction, such as the arena, can look rather tribal, some of the armors you can craft look like medieval knight armor. Sprinkle in some advanced technology, such as a massive chain lift that takes you around the hub area and guns found in the gun lance and the heavy bowgun, and you get this strange mix of tribal and steampunk. Maybe that's just me though, I don't know. Dauntless' style is a bit more out there. Same mix of typical fantasy with elements of steampunk, but with some additional elements that make the game world more imaginative. Dauntless has a technology called Aether Tech. This tech is used to create the game's flying airships, some of the more futuristic looking armors, and straight up guns. Yes, dual pistols are one of the weapon choices available to you. The land masses that you visit in Dauntless are all floating islands, as well as the hub area, to help better seat that high fantasy feeling. Now before we jump into the game's weapon types and monster design, let's quickly touch on the performance of both games. This section mostly applies to PC, since games tend to be optimized to run smoother on consoles. For my Nvidia 1070, Monster Hunter has always been the more demanding of the two. I struggle to keep it at 60 FPS on max or high settings, as it tends to linger more around 50. At the very least, it's a consistent and steady 50, but still. Don't forget to download the free high-resolution texture pack for the game if it doesn't automatically install when you buy it. It's mostly noticeable in the armors and weapons, but trust me, it makes a huge difference in armor quality. Dauntless runs much better for me personally. When it first released, it was pretty performance heavy and not very well optimized even on console. The Hellion was causing massive frame drops on console and basically made the fight unplayable. Since release, they've been steadily working on and increasing optimization, and I can happily say that the game runs smooth. I can say though, that in the 100 plus hours I've put into both games, I've experienced many more bugs in Dauntless. Nothing totally game-breaking, but things like certain weapon abilities not having cooldowns, characters getting stuck in endless loops of falling off the island, monsters launching players to the moon, and players getting stuck in the environment. So, at long last, onto the good stuff, weapons and combat. Starting with Monster Hunter, it has the larger variety of weapons, 14 in total. The longsword, greatsword, dual blades, sword and shield, switch axe, which is both an axe and a sword, charge blade, which is a sword and a shield in one form and a powered up greatsword in the other, hammer, hunting horn, lance but with a gun, insect glaive, bow, as well as the light and heavy bowguns. Each one tailors to a different playstyle. While the weapons like the lance are slow and tanky, the insect glaive is a fast weapon that incorporates acrobatics and an insect companion. It can take you a while to find a weapon that you're comfortable with, but don't give up. With this many weapon types, you're bound to find one that fits a style you like. Dauntless, on the other hand, only has 7 weapon types: sword, hammer, axe, pistols, polearm, chain blades, and strikers, which are basically boxing gloves. While the fact that Dauntless has half the weapon types of Monster Hunter might be a large downside to you, remember that Dauntless is a game that has a roadmap and planned updates, and the team behind Dauntless have said that they are planning on adding more weapon types over the game's lifespan. That's not to say that Monster Hunter doesn't get updated as well, they just tend to be patches pertaining to things like events and maybe a balance change. Just stating that Dauntless is a service game, so more content in any form could be added. But how do all these weapon types feel? How do the two games play? Despite being in the same genre, the games play entirely different from one another. If you like gameplay that's challenging because you have to manage and juggle a lot of systems but makes you feel incredibly rewarded and skillful for successfully managing all of those systems, then you'll prefer Monster Hunter. If you like gameplay that's fast-paced, flashy, easy to pick up but challenging to master, set in a more slightly social environment, then you'll like Dauntless. I realize that sounds like I'm selling Dauntless short with that brief description, but sitting here writing this script, I realize that these games are so fundamentally different that comparing and contrasting them one-to-one is doing both of them a disservice. At a surface level of gameplay, they are very similar to each other. Select a monster to hunt, drop in an area, kill the monster, get crafting materials, craft and upgrade better gear to fight monsters more effectively. But when you get down into the nitty-gritty, there's so many differences between the two, it's like comparing working at McDonald's to working at a strip club. On the surface, you still go to work, provide a service, get paid and go home, but really an outright compare and contrast doesn't really work. Of all of the analogies I could have made, why a strip club and McDonald's? I don't know. So, to really feel that I've covered both of these games properly and to help the wonderful people watching decide which of the two games they would prefer, I'm going to go much more in depth with both of the game systems. So I guess this actually just turned into a mini review of both games. First, let's talk about the environments you actually fight the monsters in. In Monster Hunter, heading to find the monster can sometimes be an adventure in itself. The area these monsters wander are absolutely massive, filled with multiple pathways, caves leading down, vines to head up higher, and twisting shortcuts and paths all throughout the level. The levels feel very organic, and along your way there are all sorts of resources to gather in order to craft various consumables. The levels also have natural hazards, such as molten caves that slowly drain your health as you remain in them, muddy water that slows your movement speed, passive and aggressive wildlife, and even monsters other than the one you're hunting. Level design is one of the biggest points that separates the two games. In Monster Hunter, exploring these levels is a large part of gameplay. You actually have to track monsters by examining footprints, feathers, or scales you come across in order to find the monster. It's also possible to essentially free roam these areas in order to gather resources and crafting materials. The downside about having environments this intricately designed is that there isn't a large variety of them. There's only 5 of them, 6 if you include the one coming in the Iceborne expansion. Dauntless opts for a much more simplistic design, doing away with the more RPG elements and focusing more on fast action. The area design is much smaller. They've gotten more intricate in their design as they release more islands and monsters, but it's still relatively simplistic compared to Monster Hunter. You'll very quickly learn the layouts of these islands and in what areas the monster will most likely be, because there isn't a lot of them. One island in particular is very minimal, as there are 3 areas where the monster could potentially be, and you can see each of these areas from where you spawn. There are still resources to gather on the island to craft consumables, but they're far less in variety. There's also no real environmental hazards or other wildlife roaming around the island. Let's finally start talking about combat, starting with Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter's combat is the more challenging of the two, and depending on what you're looking for in a game, that can be a good or a bad thing. The weapons really have weight behind them, the heavier weapons requiring long deliberate swings and locking you in attack animation. Stamina management is a big factor as well in every attack, even light attacks use stamina. You move at a snail's pace if you don't sheathe some of the larger weapons, meaning fights with more mobile monsters has you constantly sheathing and unsheathing your weapon in order to keep up with them. You also have to contend with the environment you're fighting in, dealing with elevation changes and obstacles in the area, a contrast to Dauntless's obstacle-free fight areas. You can also carry many more consumables with you in Monster Hunter, things like your standard health potion, super health potions, stamina potions, various different consumables to rid you of debuffs, and items to buff your health, stamina, or resistances. The amount of consumables you can take with you is what I meant by managing and juggling lots of things during combat. On top of consumables, you have things like nets to capture monsters, various mantles to apply to your character that grant a unique effect, ammo for your arm slinger, as well as all your different ammo if you're using a ranged weapon. You also have to deal with your weapon sharpness. As you attack, your weapon gets duller, does less damage, and will eventually become so dull that your attacks will bounce off the monster. Using a whetstone is the only way to resharpen your weapon. The monster design in Monster Hunter is fantastic, from oversized lizards like the Great Jagras to more traditional dinosaur monsters like the Anjanath, birds, dragons, and quite a few other surprises that I won't spoil. Monster Hunter comes out on top of Dauntless in terms of how many monsters there are. Monster Hunter has a whopping 31. If you include the Iceborne monsters, it goes up to 59. Although, some of the Iceborne monsters are just renamed and reskinned version of the base game monsters, but they do have different fight mechanics. Dauntless, on the other hand, currently only has 19. As much as I am a fan of both games, I really hope Dauntless prioritizes more monsters in future patches. Another big difference between the two games is each monster's personality. Now, I know that's a weird one, but let me explain. In Dauntless, the monsters are essentially set up in an arena and are always ready to fight to the death with you. In Monster Hunter, there are some monsters that simply won't bother you if you don't bother them. There are monsters that are only fighting because you started it, and they're just fighting for their lives, like the Kuliyaku. The whole fight, its attacks aren't very coordinated, and you'll have to deal with it retreating multiple times in an attempt to run away. compared to Devil Joe, which wants to rid the planet of everything with a pulse. It's weird to explain, but at times the monster AI in Monster Hunter feels more organic. In my opinion, this makes it feel more rewarding once you start to understand and predict the monster's attack patterns. Monster Hunter's combat takes a lot of time to get the hang of, as for the first few hours you'll feel like you're fighting with the controls in the game itself as opposed to the monster. Again, challenging system that's very rewarding once you're skilled at it. Dauntless plays much more like a hack and slash, with the rapid pace of combat and quick flashy attacks of your weapons. You're not juggling nearly as many things in combat. You can only carry 4 consumables with you into combat, your default being 5 health potions. You can carry other consumables such as grenades, pylons that provide an area effect buff to your party, and various other buff potions. Some of the weapon types in Dauntless have a unique role that they can fill in a group. The War Pike excels at doing wound damage to monster parts. Once enough wound damage has been done, it creates a glowing wound on the monster, showing your party members that that part of the body will now take more damage. Repeaters are good at consistent DPS, as well as being able to constantly buff the party throughout the fight. Hammers and strikers are great at staggering behemoths, and dealing enough damage to a monster's head will cause it to get stunned. Swords, axes, and chain blades are strong DPS weapons, and are great for interrupting. Each of these weapons have a special attack that give them some sort of unique flavor. For the chain blades, you evade into the air and bring your blades crashing down. For the axe, you throw it at the monster, dealing damage as it passes through, and then activate again to do a heavy overhead strike. The hammer essentially has a shotgun built into the head of it that you can use to interrupt monsters or as a boost to leap into the air. These abilities can also be swapped out as you level up their respective weapon types. The monsters in Dauntless play much more like boss fights than organic monsters. Their aggression level is pretty high and they almost never stop to give you and your party a chance to get in some free hits. Another reason they feel like boss fights is the fact that indicators above the monster's head will tell you if it's taken enough stagger damage and is close to getting stunned, as well as indicators showing you when it can be interrupted with a heavy attack. Speaking of monsters, I absolutely love the monster design in Dauntless. Dauntless separates its monsters by elemental type: neutral, which are no element, fire, ice, terra, lightning, umbral, and radiant. Each element has a unique status effect that accompany them and you'll need to contend with during the fight. Some of the monsters might come off as reskins of early monsters, but they fight completely different. The Pangar and the Hellion might just look like fire and ice versions of each other, but their fights have some big differences. The Hellion spawns volcanoes all over the battlefield, while the Pangar is constantly shooting up ice spikes to freeze players. While Dauntless might not have much in the ways of variety, each monster fights differently enough that it'll never get too samey. What about the gear and crafting in both games? Starting with Monster Hunter yet again, it has the largest variety of armors due to having more monsters to craft the armor from. Each armor piece in Monster Hunter has an armor rating, different elemental resistances, and unique perks or gem slots. There are also alpha and beta versions of each set. They vary slightly in appearance, but the difference is that the beta set will have less perks and more gem slots, and the alpha will have more perks but less, or in some cases no, gem slots. A big difference between Dauntless and Monster Hunter is how they handle crafting. In Monster Hunter, once you've gathered the materials to craft a piece of armor, you simply craft it, and that's it. You have that piece of gear. You can upgrade it a bit more with enhancement stones, as well as raise its armor rating a tad bit, but that's it. Once that's done, the armor piece is complete. In Dauntless, the armor rating of each piece of gear is homogenized, meaning that in terms of raw defense, they're all the same. What sets the armors apart is the elemental resistance and perks they offer to a build. These perks also upgrade as you upgrade the armor. When the armor piece is at +5, the perk upgrades to +2. When you upgrade the piece to +10, the perk upgrades to +3. It's the exact same for weapons in Dauntless. Each weapon has the same base damage, but different perks, cell slots, and elemental type, and you upgrade them the same as well. In Monster Hunter, however, the weapons have upgrade trees, meaning that you can technically finish the game with the exact same weapon you started with, depending on what tree you decided to go down. One downside of the weapon trees is that it's difficult to plan what weapon you're going for in the early game, as the tree won't have its later paths revealed until you've progressed far enough in the story or killed the monster that corresponds to it. But once you reach the ends of these trees, these weapons are truly epic. I spoke about decorations and cells a minute ago. These are additional perks that you can slot into your armor and weapons to customize your build. In both games, they are earned through your normal gameplay rotation. They can drop at the end of hunts once you've killed monsters, or in the case of Dauntless, found in cores. You get cores from leveling up your mastery and hunt pass, both of which we'll talk about in a bit. Monster Hunter absolutely has a much wider range of decorations to choose from, meaning there's a lot more opportunity for creative builds. In both games, these slottable abilities are what give your playstyle a unique flair. For example, In Monster Hunter, I kind of suck, and I'm pretty bad at predicting monster attacks. I tend to get hit and dodge a lot. Thus, I created a build using the Valhazak set and some decorations that allow me to steadily regain health passively, regen stamina faster, and increase my attack power once I reach full health. In contrast to Dauntless, which I'm actually rather decent at, my build has me staying at low health to gain attack speed and damage while increasing my dodge windows. But again, Monster Hunter comes out on top in terms of variety of builds, with there being builds tailored to specific weapon types or to counter specific monsters. Now, onto some miscellaneous stuff that I couldn't really fit into these categories. Monster Hunter has a unique way of being able to buff the player before a hunt, but it can also be seen as an annoying, inconvenient step you have to do before going on a high-level hunt. The Canteen. At the Canteen, you can choose a meal for your hunter to eat before going out on a hunt. This can do a variety of things like buff health and stamina, attack, defense, and resistances. It's a neat feature that you can customize your build just a tad bit more, but for me personally it's always an annoyance when I have to remember to stop by the canteen before a hunt. This system is also needlessly convoluted in a typical JRPG style. Dauntless may have had something like this in its early development stages, as there's a tavern-looking building in town that, to my knowledge, hasn't been used for anything before, or yet. In Monster Hunter, if you're struggling during a hunt, you can fire an SOS flare from the menu to allow other players to join your game. Sometimes these randoms are absolutely awful, and will join just to purposely die to make you fail the hunt. Other times they can be level 100 plus badasses that join in and kill the monster faster than you can say hi. On the other hand, Dauntless by default matches you with 3 other random people through a matchmaker. I like this about Dauntless personally. In both games I struggle under pressure and need party members to share the monster's attention with, or I get stomped. Of course, you can do any hunt solo should you want to. In Monster Hunter, when you lose all your health, you faint and are taken back to the spawn point. The party has a total of 3 faints per hunt. Depleting all of them fails the hunt and you are taken back to town. In Dauntless, when you lose all of your health, you go into a down state and can be revived. Dauntless has something called a danger meter. How this meter works is as you're fighting a monster, it is steadily rising based on how well the party is doing. The more damage they take, the faster it rises. A player getting downed causes it to rise even faster until that player is revived. Once the meter reaches 100, revives are disabled and the monster hits harder. The only way to drop the meter back down is to make the monster retreat by dealing enough damage to it. Another way Monster Hunter separates itself gameplay-wise is the fact that when on a solo or duo hunt, you have an AI companion with you. When you create your character in Monster Hunter, you also create a Palico. A Palico is an adorable cat companion that can do a variety of things for you in combat, such as delivering a health boost to you, stunning the monster, helping you get additional break parts, and much more. Let's talk about Dauntless's mastery system that I mentioned earlier. This mastery system is another task players can do at endgame. Basically, each individual weapon, each overall weapon type, and each monster have a set of objectives pertaining to them. Completing these earns you XP to your overall level, as well as some rewards like cores, cells, titles, and loadout slots, and even character buffs. Leveling this mastery system is important in order to gain every advantage you can at endgame, because it gives you boost to maximum health and stamina. Now, the biggest difference between the two games is their whole structure. Monster Hunter is much more story-focused. The first 20 or so hours of gameplay consist of you following the game's story and doing low-rank hunts. It can take a while for the game to open up and you to start working on your endgame progression, which some people like and others don't. Dauntless, on the other hand, has a story, but not one with cutscenes and specific missions, just text dialogue from NPCs telling you to kill a specific monster or level up your gear to a certain level before unlocking more monsters. Now, how do the games monetize themselves? Specifically Dauntless, being as it's a free-to-play. Well, Dauntless has the typical things you expect to see in a free-to-play game's cash shop. Dyes, consumables, emotes, weapon and armor skins, and additional customization options for your character. One thing of note that really sticks out to me about Dauntless being a free-to-play game is the fact that you can change your character's appearance for free whenever you want, even change gender. That's something you have to pay for in almost every other free-to-play game, and even some buy-to-play games, so kudos to Phoenix Labs for doing that. Dauntless also has a hunt pass, which is just like a battle pass. There's a free tier or a premium tier that you can buy for $10, and the seasons last for about 45 days or so. In the hunt pass, there are items like consumables, cash shop currency, emotes, dyes, weapon skins, and usually a premium armor at the 50th tier. You earn points for this pass by gathering collectibles around town once per day and completing bounties. Even though Monster Hunter is buy to play, it does have some post-launch content that you can buy besides just the Iceborne expansion. These are some small things you can pretty much live without, like emotes, additional character customization, additional outfits for the handler, which is that girl that's with you throughout Monster Hunter's story, and paying to be able to edit the appearance of your character. So last but not least, let's talk about each game's endgame. Now, the problem with games like Monster Hunter and Dauntless is that once you've killed the final monster, the endgame becomes what you make it out to be. In Monster Hunter, killing the Elder Dragons is your soft endgame. Once that's done, it's grinding to Hunter rank 100 in order to unlock the final quest. There's a large gap in between killing the Elder Dragons and Hunter rank 100 though, and a majority of players won't do it. So from this point, the endgame is what you make of it. Crafting all armor sets, mastering all weapons, or getting really good at fighting a specific monster, farming decorations, and making really powerful or interesting builds. For me, it was just farming Val Hasak to complete my health regen build, and after I completed that, I put the game down for a while. I can't speak for how or if this endgame will change with the Iceborne expansion however, so maybe keep an eye out or do some research on that. It's almost the same situation in Dauntless. Once you defeat the final two monsters, you're just kind of left with a feeling of what now. From there, what you should do is level up your mastery to allow you to craft weapons past plus 10 to plus 15. All while working on a build to start competing in Trials. Trials are Dauntless's competitive endgame, where every week there's a monster with specific affixes that can make killing it more challenging. There are always leaderboards on display in town that show who currently has the fastest kill time. As I said earlier, Dauntless is a much more fast-paced game. A lot of the times on these leaderboards are below 1 minute. Getting fast kills awards you with currency that can be spent at a special vendor to award you with cells, weapon abilities, and skins you can't get anywhere else. So with this video, I hope that I might have helped you in deciding which of these two games you'd prefer to play more. If you have any more questions, be sure to comment down below and I'll answer as best I can. If you enjoyed or found the video helpful, be sure to let me and YouTube know with that thumbs up button. That's all for now. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you again very soon.